Yeah, I'm a bit small right now. I was trying to make sure things were working, and, well, chibitize myself, which does tend to happen from time to time. What can I say? The real question is, how much longer do I have on the chibi size? Oh, I still got another minute and a half. Okay. The definition of it is, I am small. But it is Fairy Tale Friday, so being chibi size is somewhat appropriate, I suppose. And I think Sound Alerts is working too, so. Though I'm a little annoyed that Stream Elements is not switched over to Kel. But it's not letting me change it either, so. Let's see. Media requests? No. Maybe. Nope. Well, let me pop it up on that one. Well, let me do this one. Nope, the activity feed dock is completely not working. Oh, what? Maybe? Maybe, possibly? Hello? Ah, there you go. Nice of you to join us, and... Oh! Ah, crap. The chibi spell is still going. Hold on, let me blink a few times, and... There we go, okay. Why am I so short? Hello? Why am I so short? Don't think little of me, please. Oh, that sounds bad. That should not have happened. Hello, there we go. That was just really awkward. But anyway, Fairy Tale Friday. So we're going to be doing fairy tales again tonight. I do have the pinned message in chat. I do really hate the fact that I don't get to pay as much attention to chat as I do. Why is it still running ads? Hello? Ads, please go away. Damn. So I guess I should go ahead and, let people know that I'm doing this. Since the X-Twits don't let the auto posts go through anymore. Okay, well. The Twitter version's there now. Man, I wasn't yawning until I started. Let's see, I've got... Ooh, down fill my hydration bottles. Okay, I got a little over half a bottle, so it should be good. Transfer what I have on now to another. I wonder what's left. Okay. Ouch. What the heck is that? Anyway, it's telling me there's still 10 seconds of ads left, so I guess I will wait. Hey, ad break is over. So I would like to direct everyone's attention to the links below. I don't have the direct links for my books down there, but I do have my affiliate links. For anyone who likes to read books, by all means, feel free to go through my book links and pick up, a good selection of books. Try to get the advertising portion of the stream done before I do anything else. Just like I do read fairy tales, but I also edited books of fairy tales. I'm editing a second one, but I do have the first one out, and it is available for sale. A Wild Among Us. I need an Among Us. Oh, excuse me. Yeah. It's real cold outside, so I don't remember if I have Treat Stream running anymore or not. Not that anyone would need to send me food. I've got plenty. Like I ate, not that long before coming on. Yeah. The only thing I've got my treat stream are like tacos and Bacon King, so yeah, I don't need it anyway. But if you want to donate to the cause, PayPal is open. I do have the Stream Elements tip jar. Oh, the Among Us got away. Oh well. Anyway, I do also have my somewhat official book bags. But again, you guys just being here, and if you subscribe, thank you. If not, if you watch the ads or have things to skip the ads, as long as the ads play, it helps me out. So, and it is coming up on Christmas and, well, Thanksgiving. And winter is coming. So heating bills are going to be coming up too. And as much as I tend to rely on my own personal warmth, occasionally I do get cold, so any help is nice. But don't feel obligated. And looking down at my followers listing there, I am still 2 away from reaching the 300 goal, which is awesome. I think a couple of days ago I got 5 in one night, and it wasn't even the night I streamed. It's the night that I was lurking and went to someone else's stream. And let's see. Why is it? Oh, let's give me really old alerts right there. Switch to activity feed. Okay, who was it? Okay, yeah, it's Legacy. But we'd gone to Legacy's stream, and a lot of her followers followed me, so let me, if my cursor would let me do this. Let's pop it up in chat. Not just more my ads. Kelly's actually advertising for me. But yeah, if anyone wants to go help out another reader who is just getting started in this, so by all means, let's support them as much as we can. Go check out Legacy. Nice little book fairy. So feel free to check them out. Wait, are they on? Where's my stream just really that laggy? No, no. Okay, yeah, they are on. They came on a few minutes after I did. But she also reads books from her Kindle, and then she posts the Kindle on her stream, so that way you guys can read along with her. But seeing as we're already 16 minutes into the hour, I suppose I should switch over and actually start reading, so let me go and get us over to the library real quick. And here we are. Why am I small in this one too? That's just weird. Oh well. There we go. Let's just do it that way. Okay, so let me get things arranged here so I can keep an eye on you guys in chat. And we will get into our first story for the night. And having said that, our first story for the evening is Princess Rosette. Once upon a time there lived a king and queen who had 2 beautiful sons and 1 little daughter, who was so pretty that no one who saw her could help but loving her. When it was time for the christening of the princess, the queen, as she always did, sent for all the fairies to be present at the ceremony, and afterwards invited them to a splendid banquet. When it was over, and they were preparing to go away, the queen said to them, "Do not forget your usual good custom. Tell me what is going to happen to Rosette." For that was the name of the princess, as given by the title. But the fairies said they had left their book of magic at home, and they would come another day to tell her. "Ah," said the queen, "I know very well what that means. You have nothing good to say. But at least I beg that you will not hide anything from me." So, after a good deal of persuasion, they said, "Madam, we fear that Rosette may be the cause of great misfortunes to her brothers. They may even meet their death through her. That is all we have been able to foresee about your dear little daughter. We are very sorry to have nothing better for you." Then they went away, leaving the queen very sad, so sad that the king noticed it, and asked her what was the matter. The queen said that she had been sitting too near the fire, and had burnt all the flax that was upon her distaff. "Oh, is that all?" said the king, and he went up to the garret and brought her down some more flax that she could spin in 100 years. But the queen still looked sad, and the king asked her again what was the matter. She answered that she had been walking by the river, and had dropped one of her green satin slippers into the water. "Oh, is that all?" said the king, and he sent for all the shoemakers in the kingdom, and they very soon made the queen 10,000 green satin slippers. But she still looked very sad. So the king asked her again what was the matter, and this time she answered that in her eating porridge too hastily, she had swallowed her wedding ring. So that it happened that the king knew better, for he had the ring himself. And he said, "Oh, you are not telling me the truth, for I have your ring here in my purse." Then the queen was very much ashamed, and she saw that the king was vexed with her. So she told him all that the fairies had predicted about Rosette, and begged him how to think of the misfortunes might be prevented. Then it was the king's turn to look sad, and at last he said, "I see no way of saving our sons except by having Rosette's head cut off while she is still little." A bit drastic. But the queen cried that she would far rather have her own head cut off, and that he had better think of something else, for she would never consent to such a thing. So they thought and thought, but they could not tell what to do, until at last the queen heard that in the great forest near the castle there was an old hermit who lived in a hollow tree, and perhaps people came from far and near to consult him. So she said, "I had better go and ask for his advice. Perhaps he will know what to do to prevent the misfortunes which the fairies foretold." She set out very early the next morning, mounted upon a pretty little white mule, which was shod in solid gold, and 2 of her ladies rode behind her on beautiful horses. When they reached the forest, they dismounted, for the trees grew so thickly that horses could not pass, and made their way on foot to the hollow tree where the hermit lived. At first, when he saw them coming, he was vexed, for he was not fond of ladies. But when he recognized the queen, he said, "You are welcome, queen. What do you come to ask me?" Then the queen told him all the fairies had foreseen for Rosette, and asked what she should do. And the hermit answered that she must shut the princess up in a tower, and never let her come out of it again. The queen thanked and rewarded him, and hastened back to the castle to tell the king. When he heard the news, he had a great tower built as quickly as possible, and there the princess was shut up, and the king and queen and her 2 brothers went to see every day that she might not be dull. The oldest brother was called the Great Prince, the second the Little Prince. They loved their sister dearly, for she was the sweetest, prettiest princess who was ever seen, and at least a little smile from her was worth more than 100 gold pieces. When Rosette was 15 years old, the Great Prince went to the king and asked if he would not soon come to time for her to be married, and the little prince put the same question towards the queen. Their majesties were amused at them for thinking of it, but did not make their reply, and soon both the king and queen were taken ill and died on the very same day. Everybody was sorry, Rosette especially, and all the bells in the kingdom were tolled. Then all the dukes and councillors put the great prince upon the golden throne, and crowned him with a diamond crown, and they all cried, "Long live the king!" And after that there was nothing but feasting and rejoicing. The new king and his brother said to one another, "Now that we are masters, let us take our sister out of that dull tower which she is so tired of." They only had to go across the garden to reach the tower, which was very high and stood up in a corner. Rosette was busy at her embroidery, but when she saw her brother, she got up and, taking the king's hand, and cried, "Good morning, dear brother. Now that you are the king, please take me out of this dull tower, for I am so tired of it." Then she began to cry, but the king kissed her and told her to dry her tears. And that was just what they had come to do, to take her out of the tower and to bring her to the beautiful castle. And the prince showed her the pocketful of sugar plums that he had brought for her, and said, "Make haste, and let us get away from this ugly tower. Very soon the king will arrange grand marriage for you." When Rosette saw the beautiful garden, full of flowers and fruits, with green grass and sparkling fountains, she was so astonished that not a word could she say, for she had never in her life seen anything like it before. She looked around her and ran hither and thither, gathering fruit and flowers, and her little dog Frisk, who was bright green all over, and had but one ear, danced with her, crying, "Wow, wow, wow!" and turning head over heels in the most enchanting way. Green dog. Everybody was amused at Frisk's antics, but all of a sudden he ran away into a little wood, and the princess was following him, when to her great delight she saw a peacock, who was spreading his tail in the sunshine. Rosette thought she had never seen anything so pretty. She could not take her eyes off of him, and there she stood entranced until the king and the prince came up and asked what was amusing her so much. She showed them the peacock and asked what it was, and they answered that it was a bird which people sometimes ate. "What?" said the princess. "Do they dare to kill that beautiful creature and eat it? I declare that I will never marry anyone but the king of the peacocks, and when I am queen I will take good care of that nobody eats any of my subjects." Princesses. At this the king was very much astonished, as are we all. "But, little sister," he said, "where shall we find the king of peacocks?" "Oh, wherever you like, sire," she answered, "but I will never marry anyone else." After this, they took Rosette to the beautiful castle, and the peacock was brought with her, and told to walk about the terrace outside her windows, so that she might always see him. And then the ladies of the court came to see the princess, and they brought her beautiful presents. Dresses, ribbons, sweetmeats, diamonds and pearls and dolls and embroidered slippers. And she was so well brought up and said, "Thank you," so prettily and she was so gracious that everyone went away delighted with her. Meanwhile, the king and the prince were considering how they should find the king of the peacocks, if there was such a person in the world. And first of all, they had a portrait made of the princess, which was so like her that you really would not have been surprised if it had spoken to you. And then they said to her, "Since you will not marry anyone but the king of peacocks, we are going out together into the wide world to search for him. If we find him for you, we shall be very glad. In the meantime, mind you take good care of your kingdom." Rosette thanked them for all the trouble they were taking on her account, and promised to take great care of the kingdom, and only to amuse herself by looking at the peacock and making frisk dance while they were away. So they set out, and asked everyone they met, "Do you know the king of the peacocks?" But the answer was always, "No, no." Then they went on and on, so far that no one has ever been further, and at last they came to the kingdom of the cockchafers. They had never before seen a number of cockchafers, and the buzzing was so loud that the king was afraid he should be deafened by it. He asked the most distinguished-looking cockchafer if he had ever met or if he knew where they could find the king of peacocks. "Sire," replied the cockchafer, "his kingdom is 30,000 leagues from this. You have come the longest way." "Oh, and how do you know that?" said the king. "Oh," said the cockchafer, "we know all you very well, since we spent 2 or 3 months in your garden every year." Thereupon the king and the prince made great friends with him, and they all walked arm in arm and dined together, and afterwards the cockchafer showed them all the curiosities of his strange country, where the tiniest green leaf costs a gold piece, and more. Then they set out again to finish their journey, and this time, as they knew the way, they were not long upon the road. It was easy to guess that they had come to the right place, for they saw peacocks in every tree, and their cries could be heard a long way off. Let's see if I can do a good peacock impersonation. Yep, that sounds like a peacock. Sorry. Then they reached the city, and they found it full of men and women who were dressed entirely in peacock feathers, which were evidently, though, prettier than anything else. They soon met the king, who was driving about in a beautiful little golden carriage which glittered with diamonds, and was drawn at full speed by 12 peacocks. The king and the prince were delighted to see that the king of the peacocks was as handsome as possible. He had curly golden hair and was very pale, and he wore a crown of peacock's feathers. When he saw Rosette's brothers, he knew them at once, and that they were strangers, and stopping his carriage, he sent for them to speak to him. When they had greeted him, they said, "Sire, we have come from very far away to show you a beautiful portrait." So saying, they drew from their traveling bag the picture of Rosette's. The king looked at it in silence for a long time, but at last he said, I could not have believed that there was such a beautiful princess in the world. Indeed, she really is 100 times as pretty as that, said her brothers. I think you must be making fun of me, replied the King of Peacocks. Sire, said the prince, my brother is a king like yourself. He is called the King. I am called the Prince. And that is the portrait of our sister, the Princess Rosette. We have come to ask if you would like to marry her. She is as good as she is beautiful, and we will give her a bushel of gold pieces for her dowry.
Oh, with all my heart, replied the king, and I will make her very happy. She shall have whatever she likes, and I shall love her dearly. Only, I warn you that if she is not as pretty as you have told me, I will have your heads cut off.
Oh, certainly we can quite agree to that, said one of the brothers in one breath.
Very well. Off with you into prison, and stay there until the princess arrives, said the King of the Peacocks.
And the princess were so sure that Rosette was far prettier than her portrait that they winced without a murmur. They were very kindly treated, and that they might not feel dull while the king came often to see them. As for Rosette's portrait, it was taken up to the palace, and the king did nothing but gaze at it all day and all night. As the king and the prince had to stay in prison, they sent a letter to the princess telling her to pack up all her treasures as quickly as possible and come to them, as the King of Peacocks was waiting to marry her. But they did not say that they were in prison for fear of, making her queasy. When Rosette received the letter, she was so delighted that she ran about telling everyone that the King of Peacocks was found, and she was going to marry him. Guns were fired, fireworks were set off. Everyone had as many cakes and sweetmeats as they wanted. And for 3 days, everybody who came to see the princess was presented with a slice of bread and jam, a nightingale's egg, and some hippocras. After having thus entertained her friends, she distributed her dolls among them, and left her brother's kingdom to the care of the wisest old men in the city, telling them to take charge of everything, not to spend any money, and save it all up until the king should return, and above all, not to forget to feed her peacock. Then she set out, only taking with her her nurse and her nurse's daughter, and the little green dog Frisk. They took a boat and put out to sea, carrying with them the bushel of gold pieces, and enough dresses to last the princess 10 years if she wore 2 of them every day. And a wardrobe. And they did nothing but laugh and sing. The nurse asked the boatman, can you take us to the kingdom of the peacocks? But he answered, oh no, oh no. And then she said, you must take us, you must take us. And he answered, very soon, very soon. And then the nurse said, will you take us, will you take us? And the boatman answered, yes, yes. And then she whispered in his ear, do you want to make your fortune? And he said, certainly I do. Can I tell you how to get a bag of gold? Said she. I ask nothing better, said the boatsman. Well, said the nurse, tonight, when the princess is asleep, you must help me throw her into the sea. And when she is drowned, I will put her beautiful clothes upon my daughter, and we will take her to the King of the Peacocks, who will only be too glad to marry her. And as a reward, you shall have a boat full of diamonds. That would sink it. The boatman was very much surprised at the proposal and said, but what a pity to drown such a pretty princess. The boatman, however, was persuaded by the nurse to help him. And when the night came and the princess was fast asleep as usual,
with Frisk curled up on his cushion on the foot of her bed. The wicked nurse fetched the boatman and her daughter, and between them they picked up the princess, feather bed, mattress, pillows, blankets and all, and threw her into the sea, without even waking her. Now, luckily the princess's bed was entirely stuffed with phoenix feathers, which are very rare, and have the property of always floating upon water, so Rosette went on swimming about as if she had been on a boat. After a little while she began to feel very cold, and turned round so often that she woke Frisk, who started up, and, having a very good nose, smelt the soles and herrings so close to him that he began to bark. He barked so long and so loud that he woke all the other fish, who came swimming up to the princess's bed, and poking at it with their great heads. As for her, she said to herself, "How does our boat rock upon the water? I'm really glad that I am not often as comfortable as I have been tonight." She was, however, a deep sleeper. The wicked nurse and the boatman, who were by this time a long way off, heard Frisk barking, and said to each other, "That horrid little animal and his mistress are drinking our health in our sea-water by now. Let us make haste to land, for we must be quite near the city of the King of Peacocks." The king had sent 100 carriages to meet them, drawn by every kind of strange animal. There were lions, tigers, bears, oh my, wolves, stags, horses, buffaloes, eagles, and of course peacocks. The carriage intended for Princess Rosette had 6 blue monkeys, which could turn somersaults and dance on a tightrope, and do many other charming tricks. Their harness was of crimson velvet with red buckles, and behind the carriage walked 60 beautiful ladies chosen by the king to wait upon Rosette to amuse her. The nurse was quite taken by all the pains imaginable to deck out her daughter as princess. She put her on Rosette's prettiest frock and covered her with diamonds from head to foot. But, well, she was so ugly that nothing could make her look nice. And what was worse, she was sulky and ill-tempered, and did nothing but grumble the whole time. Teenager. Once she stepped from the boat, and the escort sent by the king of the peacocks caught sight of her. They were so surprised that they could not say a single word. "Now then, look alive!" cried the false princess. "If you don't bring me something to eat, I shall have all your heads cut off." Then they whispered, one to another, "Here's a pretty state of things. She's as wicked as she is ugly. What a bride for a poor king. She certainly was not worth bringing from the other world." But she went on ordering them about, and for no fault at all would give slaps and pinches to everyone she could reach. As the procession was so long, it advanced but slowly, and the nurse's daughter sat up in her carriage trying to look like a queen. But the peacocks, who were sitting upon every tree, walking and waiting to salute her, who made up their minds to cry, "Long live our beautiful queen." But when they caught sight of the false bride, they could not help crying instead, "Oh, how ugly she is!" Which offended her so much that she said to the guards, "Make haste and kill those insolent peacocks who dared to insult me." But the peacocks only flew away, laughing at her. The rogue of a boatman, who noticed all this, said softly to the nurse, "This is bad business for us, gossip. Your daughter ought to have been prettier.
But she answered,
Be quiet, stupid, or you'll spoil everything.
And now they told the king that the princess was approaching. Well, he said, did her brothers tell me truly? Is she prettier than her portrait?
Sire, they answered, if she were as pretty as that, you would do very well.
That's true, said the king. I, for one, shall be quite satisfied if she is. Let us go and meet her. For they knew by the uproar that she had arrived. But they could not tell what all the shouting was about. The king thought he could hear the words, Oh, ugly is she! How ugly she is! But he fancied they must refer to some dwarf the princess was bringing with her. It never occurred to him that they could apply that to his bride themselves. The Princess Rosette's portrait was carried at the head of the procession, and after it walked the king, surrounded by his courtiers. He was all impatience to see the lovely princess, but when he caught sight of the nurse's daughter, he was furiously angry, and would not advance another step, for she was really ugly enough to have frightened anybody. What? He cried. Have those two rascals who are my prisoners dared to play such a trick on me as this? Do they propose that I shall marry this hideous creature? Let her be shut up in my great tower, with her nurse and those who brought her here. And as for them, I will have their heads cut off. And then at lunch. Meanwhile, the king and the prince, who knew that their sister must have arrived, had made themselves smart, and sat expecting every minute to be summoned to greet her. So when the jailer came with soldiers and carried them down to the black dungeon, which swarmed with toads and bats, and where they were up to their necks in water, nobody could have been more surprised or dismayed than they were. Oh, this is a dismal kind of wedding, they said. What could have happened that we should be treated like this? They mean to kill us. And this annoyed them very much. Imagine. 3 days passed before they heard any news, and then the King of Peacocks came and berated them through a hole in the wall. You have called yourselves king and prince, he cried, to try to make me marry your sister, but you are nothing but beggars, not worth the water you drink. I mean to make short work of you, with a sword as being sharpened that will cut off your heads. King of Peacocks, answered the king angrily, you had better take care what you're about. I'm as good a king as yourself, and I have a splendid kingdom and robes and crowns and plenty of good red gold to do what I like with. You are pleased to jest about cutting our heads off? Perhaps you think we have stolen something from you. At first the King of Peacocks was taken aback by this bold speech, and had half a mind to send them away altogether. But his prime minister declared that it would never do to let such a trick that is pass unpunished. Everybody would laugh at him, so the accusation was drawn up against them that they were impostors, and that they had promised the king a beautiful princess in marriage who, when she arrived, proved to be an ugly peasant girl. This accusation was read to the prisoners, who cried out that they had spoken the truth, that their sister was indeed a princess more beautiful than they, and that there was some mystery about all of this which they could not in faith fathom. Therefore they demanded 7 days in which to prove their innocence. The King of Peacocks was so angry that they would hardly even grant them his favor, but at last he was persuaded to do so. While all this was going on at court, let us see what had happened to the real princess. When the day broke, she and Frisk were equally astonished at finding themselves alone upon the sea, with no boat, and no one to help them. The princess cried and cried until even the fishes were sorry for her. "Alas," she said, "the king of peacocks must have ordered me to be thrown into the sea because he had changed his mind and did not want to marry me. But how strange of him, when I should have loved him so much. We should have been so very happy together." And then she cried harder than ever, for she could not help but still loving him. So for 2 days they floated up and down the sea, wet and shivering with cold, and so hungry that when the princess saw some oysters, she caught them, and she and Frisk both ate some, though they didn't like them at all. Can't blame her. When night came, the princess was so frightened that she said to Frisk, "Oh, please do keep on barking for fear the soul should come and eat us up." Now, it happened that they floated close to the shore, where a poor old man was living alone in his little cottage. But when he heard Frisk barking, he thought to himself, "There must have been a shipwreck, for no dogs, passed by that way on chance." And he went out to see if he could be of any use. He soon saw the princess and Frisk floating up and down, and Rosette, stretching out her hands to him, cried, "Oh, good old man, do save me, or I shall die of cold and hunger." When he heard this cry, and it was so piteous, he was very sorry for her, and ran back to his house to fetch a long boat hook. Then he waded into the water up to his chin, and after being nearly drowned once or twice, he at last successfully grabbed a hold of the princess's bed, then dragged it to shore. Rosette and Frisk were joyful enough to find themselves once more on dry land, and the princess thanked the old man heartily. Then, wrapping herself up in her blankets, she daintily picked her way up to the cottage on her little bare feet. There the old man lighted a fire of straw, and then drew an old box of his wife's dress and shoes, which the princess put on. And thus, roughly clad, she looked as charming as possible, and Frisk danced his very best to amuse her. The old man saw that Rosette must be some great lady, for her bed coverings were satin and gold. He begged that she would tell him all her history, that she might safely trust him. The princess told him everything, weeping bitterly again at the thought that it was the king's orders that she should be thrown overboard. "And now, my daughter, what is to be done?" said the old man. "You are a great princess, accustomed to fare daintily, and I have nothing to offer but black bread and radishes, which will not suit you at all. Shall I go and tell the king of peacocks that you are here? If he sees you, he will certainly wish to marry you." "Oh, no," cried Rosette. "He must be wicked since he tried to drown me. Don't let us tell him, but if you have a little basket to give it to me." He gave her a basket, and tying it around Frisk's neck, she said to him, "Go and find out the best cooking pot in town and bring the contents to me." Away went Frisk, and there was no better dining in town than the king's. He adroitly took the cover off the pot, and brought all that it contained to the princess, who said, "Now go back to the pantry and bring the best of everything you find there." So Frisk went back and filled his basket with white bread and red wine and every kind of sweetmeat, until it was almost too heavy for that little dog to carry. When the king of peacocks wanted his dinner, there was nothing in the pot, and nothing in the pantry. All the courtiers looked at one another in dismay, and the king was terribly cross. "Oh, well," he said, "if there is no dinner I cannot dine, and take care of the plenty of things are roasted for supper." When evening came, the princess said to Frisk,
Go into town and find out the best kitchen, and bring me all the nicest morsels that are being roasted upon the spit."
Frisk did as he was told, and he knew no better kitchen than the king's. He went in softly, and when the cook's back was turned, took everything that was upon the spit. As it happened, it was all done to a turn, and looked so good that it had made him hungry only to see it. He carried his basket to the princess, who at once sent him back to the pantry to bring all the tarts and sugar plums that had been prepared for the king's supper. The king, as he had had no dinner, was very hungry, and wanted his supper early. But when he asked for it, lo and behold, it was gone, and he had to go to bed half-starved, and in a terrible temper. The next day the same thing happened, and the next, so that for 3 days the king got nothing at all to eat, because just when the dinner or supper was ready to be served, it mysteriously disappeared. At last, the Prime Minister began to be afraid that the king would be starved to death, so he resolved to hide himself in some dark corner of the kitchen, and never take his eyes off the cooking pot. His surprise was great when he persistently saw a little green dog with one ear slip softly through the kitchen, uncover the pot, transfer all of its contents to his basket, and then run away again. The Prime Minister followed hastily and tracked him all through the town to the cottage of the good old man. Then he ran back to the king and told him that he had found out where all his dinners and suppers went. The king, who was very much astonished, said he should like to go and see for himself. So he set out, accompanied by the Prime Minister and a guard of the archers, and arrived just in time to find the old man and the princess finishing his dinner. The king ordered that they should be seized and bound with ropes, and Frisk also. When they were brought back to the palace, someone told the king, who said, "Today is the last day of the grand respite of those impostors. They shall have their heads cut off at the time of these stealers of my dinner." Then the old man went down to his knees before the king and begged for time to tell him everything. When he spoke, the king for the first time looked attentively at the princess, because he was so sorry to see how she cried, and when he heard the old man saying that her name was Rosette, and that she had been treacherously thrown into the sea, he turned head over heels 3 times without stopping. Acrobatic. In spite of being quite weak from hunger, and ran to embrace her and untied the ropes which bound her with his own hands, declaring that he loved her with all his heart. Messengers were sent to bring the princes out of the prison, and they came very sadly, believing that they were to be executed at once. The nurse and her daughter and the boatman were brought also. As soon as they came in, Rosette ran to embrace her brothers, while the traitors threw themselves down before her and begged for mercy. The king and the princess were so happy that they freely forgave them, and as for the good old man, he was splendidly rewarded, and spent the rest of his days in the palace. The king of peacocks made ample amends to the king and prince in the way he had treated them, and did everything in his power to show that he was really very sorry for that. The nurse restored to Rosette all her dresses and jewels and the bushel of gold pieces, and the wedding was held at once, and they all lived happily ever after, even to Frisk, who enjoyed the greatest luxury, and never had anything worse than a wing of a partridge for dinner the rest of his life. Yeah. I hope the little green guy didn't choke on it. That would be very sad indeed. I love how they have to add the little dog in there.
We'll get rid of you, pretty princess, and your little dog, too.
And it seems that ads are running once again, because ads. Let's see. Oh, the ads aren't. I'm gonna snooze them. It hasn't been. Well, no, it has been an hour. Actually, let's go ahead and run the ads now, so I don't have to worry about them interrupting the next story. Okay. So we got 3 minutes. Oh, it looks like one of my raid targets is raiding out already. But it's only an hour, so... I'm going to go and switch to my Be Right Back screen for a moment, so you guys get the music anyway. That way you don't feel like you're missing anything. Desk is spootin'. Just sounds for to say. She's playing Splatoon, so. Well, Splatoon 3. I need to make a better ad. I wonder if I should make another banner or just... No, I'll just move this one over. Where is it? Bookstore address, yeah, that one. Over here. Okay. back into place. So I hope everyone's been having a good Friday. It's been pretty cool here. Cool as in temperature wise. It was sprinkling when I finally came in after dinner, so. This has got the same creepy music I play in the bookstore. So. Ads. I'm gonna check something. Okay, why is that showing the ads on my other window? It's weird. And I have the other window open just so I can monitor ads, but it's not showing any. And if it's not showing ads, I guess there's no reason for me to stay in the ad screen. So why not? Sure. Okay, one thing says it's still got... None of my ad timers have the same time on them. What the hell? One of them says that I've got 2 minutes left. Another one says I've got 30 some odd seconds left. And my actual stream is like several seconds behind. That's just weird. Anyway, let's go ahead and get into the second story. Let's see, this is Enchanted Pig. What one is this one? Enchanted Pig is 12 pages. So it's not as long as the previous one. Okay. So our second story for the night is, as I've already said, The Enchanted Pig. Once upon a time there lived a king who had 3 daughters. Now it happened that he had to go out to battle, so he called his daughters and said to them,
My dear children, I am obliged to go to war. The enemy is approaching us with a large army. It is a great grief to me to leave you all. During my absence, take care of yourselves, and be good girls. Behave well and look after everything in the house. You may walk in the garden, and you may go into the rooms of the palace, except for the room at the back on the right-hand corner. Into that you must not enter, or harm could befall you.
We will keep your mind easy, father, they answered. We have never been disobedient to you. Go in peace, and may heaven give you a glorious victory.
When everything was ready for his departure, the king gave them the keys to all the rooms and reminded them once more of what he had said. His daughters kissed his hands with tears in their eyes and wished him prosperity, and he gave the eldest the keys. Now, when the girls found themselves alone, they felt so sad and dull that they did not know what to do. So, to pass time, they decided to work part of the day, to read for part of the day, and enjoy themselves in the garden for part of the day. As long as they did this, all went well with them. But this happy state of things did not last long. Every day they grew more and more curious, and you will see what was in of that.
Sisters, said the oldest princess, all day long we sew, spin, and read. We have been several days quite alone, and there is no corner of the garden that we have not explored. We have been in all the rooms of our father's palace, and have admired the rich and beautiful furniture. Why should we not go into the room that our father has forbid us to enter? Sister, said the youngest, I cannot think how you attempt to break our father's command. When he told us not to go into that room, he must have had good reason for what he was saying.
Surely the sky won't fall on our heads if we do go in, said the seconds. Dragons and the like monsters would devour us all, not be hidden in the room. How will our father ever find out that we had gone in? While they were speaking thus, encouraging each other, they had reached the room. The eldest fitted the key into the lock, and snap! The door stood open. The three girls entered. And do you notice, huh? The room was quite empty, without any ornament, but in the middle stood a large table, with a gorgeous cloth, and on it lay a big, open book. Now the princesses were curious to know what was written in the book, especially the eldest. And this is what she read. The eldest daughter of the king will marry a prince from the east. The second girl stepped forward and turning the page over and read, The second daughter of the king will marry a prince from the west. The girls were delighted and laughed and teased each other. But the youngest princess did not want to go near the table or to open the book. Her elder sisters left her no peace, and will she, nill she, they dragged her up to the table, and in fear and trembling she turned over the page and read, The youngest daughter of the king will be married to a pig from the north. Now, if a thunderbolt had fallen upon her from the heavens, it would not have frightened her more. She almost died of misery, and if her sisters had not held her up, she would have sunk to the ground and cut her head open. When she came out of the fainting fit into which she had fallen in her terror, her sisters tried to comfort her, saying, How can you believe such nonsense? When did it ever happen that a king's daughter married a prince? What a baby you are, said the other sister.
Has not our father enough soldiers to protect you, even if the disgusting creature did come to woo you?
The youngest princess would fain have let herself be convinced by her sister's words, and have believed what they said, but her heart was heavy. Her thoughts kept turning to the book, in which stood written the great happiness awaiting her sisters, and that the fate was in store for her, as such had never been known before in the world. Besides, the thought weighed on her heart that she had been guilty of disobeying her father. She began to get quite ill, and in a few days she was so changed that it was difficult to even recognize her. Formerly she had been rosy and merry. Now she was pale, and nothing gave her pleasure. She gave up playing with her sisters in the garden, ceased to gather flowers to put up in her hair, and never sang when they sat together at their spinning wheels and sewing. In the meantime, the king won a great victory, and having completely defeated and driven off the enemy, he hurried home to his daughters, to whom his thoughts had constantly turned. Everyone went out to meet him with cymbals and fifes and drums, and there was great rejoicing over his victorious return. The king's first act on reaching home was to thank heaven for the victory that he had had over the enemies who had risen against him. He then entered his palace, and the three princesses stepped forward to meet him. His joy was great when he saw that they were all well, for the youngest did her best not to appear sad. In spite of this, however, it was not long before the king noticed that his third daughter was getting very thin and sad-looking. And all of a sudden he felt as if a hot iron had entered his soul, for it flashed through his mind that she had disobeyed his word. He felt sure he was right, but to be quite certain he called his daughters to him and questioned them, and ordered them to speak the truth. They confessed everything, but took good care not to say which had led the other two into temptation. The king was so distressed when he heard it that he was almost overcome by grief. But he took heart and tried to comfort his daughters, who looked frightened to death. He saw that what had happened, and that 1,000 words could not alter matters by a hair's breadth. Well, these events had almost been forgotten, when one fine day a prince from the east appeared in the court, and asked the king for the hand of his eldest daughter. The king gladly gave his consent, and a great wedding banquet was prepared, and after 3 days of feasting, the happy pair was accompanied to the frontier with much ceremony and rejoicing. After some time, the same thing befell the second daughter, who was wooed and won by the prince from the west. Now, when the young princess saw that everything fell out exactly as had been written in the book, she grew very sad. She refused to eat, and would not put on her fine clothes, nor go out walking, and declared that she would rather die than become a laughingstock to the world. But the king would not allow her to do anything so wrong, and he comforted her in all the possible ways. So, time passed, till lo and behold, one fine day an enormous pig from the north walked into the palace, and going straight up to the king, said, "Hail, king! May your life be as prosperous and bright as sunrise on a clear day."
I am glad to see you well, friend, answered the king. But what wind has brought you hither?
I come a-wooing, replied the pig.
Now the king was astonished to hear such a fine speech from the pig. And at once it occurred to him that something strange was the matter. He would gladly have turned the pig's thoughts in another direction, but he did not wish to give him the princess for a wife. But when he heard that the courts and the whole street were full of the pigs in the world, he saw that there was no escape, and that he must give his consent. The pig was not satisfied with mere promises, but insisted the wedding should take place within a week, and would not go away till the king had sworn a royal oath upon it. The king sent for his daughter, and advised her to submit to fate, and there was nothing else to be done. And he added, "My child, the words and the whole behavior of this pig are quite unlike any of those other pigs. I do not myself believe that he was always a pig. Dependent upon some magic or witchcraft has been at work. Obey him and do everything that he wishes, and I feel sure that heaven will shortly send you your release."
"If you wish me to do this, dear father, I will do it," replied the girl.
In the meantime, the wedding day drew near. After the marriage, the pig and his bride set out for his home in one of the royal carriages. On the way there, they passed a great bog, and the pig ordered the carriage to stop, and he got out and rolled in the mire till he was covered with mud from head to foot. And he got back into the carriage and told his wife to kiss him. What was the poor girl to do? She bethought herself of her father's words, and, pulling out a handkerchief from her pocket, she gently wiped the pig's snout and kissed it. By the time they reached the pig's dwelling, which stood in a thick wood, it was quite dark. They sat down quietly for a little, and they were tired after their drive. Then they had supper together, and lay down to rest. During the night, the princess noticed that the pig had changed into a man. She was not a little surprised, but remembering her father's words, she took courage, determined to wait and to see what would happen. And now she noticed that every night the pig would become a man, and every morning he was changed into a pig before she awoke. This happened several nights running, and the princess could not understand it at all. Clearly her husband must be bewitched. In time she grew quite fond of him, and he was kind and gentle. One fine day, as she was sitting alone, she saw an old witch go past. She felt quite excited, as it had been a long time since she had seen a human being, and she called out to the old woman to come and talk to her. Among other things, the witch told her that she understood all magic arts, and that she could foretell the future, and knew the healing powers of herbs and plants.
"I shall be grateful to you all my life, old dame," said the princess, "if you will tell me what is the matter with my husband, why he is a pig by day and a human being by night."
"I was just going to tell you that one, my dear, to show you what a good fortune teller I am. If you like, I will give you an herb to break the spell."
"If only you agree to give it to me," said the princess, "I will give you anything you choose to ask for I cannot bear to see him in this state."
"Here then, my dear child," said the witch. "Take this thread, but do not let him know about it, for if he did, it would lose its healing power. At night, when he is asleep, you must get up very quietly and hasten a thread around his left foot as firmly as possible. And you will see in the morning that he will not have changed back into a pig, but will be a man. I do not want any reward. I shall be sufficiently repaid by knowing that you are happy. It almost breaks my heart to think of all you have suffered, and I only wish I had known it sooner, as I should have come to your rescue at once.
When the old witch had gone away, the princess hid the thread very carefully, and at night she got up quietly, and with a beating heart, she bound the thread around her husband's foot. Just as she was pulling the knot tight, there was a crack, and the thread broke, for it was rotten. The husband awoke with a start and said to her, "Unhappy woman, what have you done? 3 days more and this unholy spell would have fallen from me. And now, who knows how long I may have to go about as this disgusting shape? I must leave you at once, and we shall not meet again until you have worn out 3 pairs of iron shoes and blunted a steel staff in your search for me." So saying, he disappeared. Now, when the princess was left alone, she began to weep and moan in a way that was pitiful to hear. But when she saw that her tears and groans did her no good, she got up, determined to go wherever fate should lead her. On reaching a town, the first thing she did was to order 3 pairs of iron sandals and a steel staff. And having made these preparations for her journey, she set out in search of her husband. On and on she wandered over 9 seas and across 9 continents, through forests with trees whose stems were thick as beer barrels, stumbling, knocking herself against the fallen branches, then picking herself up and going on. The boughs of the trees hit her face, and the shrubs tore her hands. But on she went, and never looked back. At last, wearied with her long journey, and worn out, and overcome with sorrow, but still with hope in her heart, she reached a house. Now, who do you suppose lived there? The moon. The princess knocked at the door and begged to be let in, that she might rest a little. The mother of the moon, when she saw her sad plight, felt a great pity on her, and took her in and nursed her and tended her. And while she was here, the princess had a little baby. On the day, the mother of the moon asked her,
"How is it possible for you, a mortal, to get hither to the house of the moon?"
Then the poor princess told her all that happened to her, and added,
"I shall be thankful for heaven for leading me hither, and grateful to you for what you have taken pity on me and my baby, and not leave us to die. Now I beg one last favor for you. Can your daughter, the moon, tell me where my husband is?" "She cannot tell you that, my child," replied the goddess. "But if you will travel towards the east until you reach the dwelling of the sun, he might be able to tell you something."
Then she gave the princess a roast chicken to eat, and warned her to be very careful not to lose any of the bones, because they might be of great use to her. When the princess had thanked her once more for her hospitality and for her good advice, and had thrown away 1 pair of shoes that were worn out, and had put on the second pair, she tied up a bundle of chicken bones in baskets, and taking her baby in her arms and her staff in her hand, she set out once more on her wanderings. On and on she went across the bare, sandy deserts, where the roads were so heavy that for every 2 steps that she took one forwards, that she fell back one. But she struggled on till she had passed these dreary plains. Next she crossed high rocky mountains, jumping from crag to crag and from peak to peak. Sometimes she would rest for a little on the mountain, and then start afresh, always farther and farther on. She had to cross swamps and scale mountain peaks covered with flints, so that her feet and her knees and her elbows were all torn and bleeding. And sometimes she came upon a precipice, across which she would not jump, and she had to crawl round on hands and knees, helping herself along with her staff. At length, wearied to death, she reached the palace in which the sun lived. She knocked and begged for admission. The mother of the sun opened the door, and was astonished at beholding a mortal from the distant earthly shores, and wept with pity when she heard all that she had suffered. Then, having promised to ask her son about the princess's husband, she hid her in the cellar, so that the son might not notice anything on his return home, for he always had a bad temper at night. The next day the princess feared that things did not go well with her, for the sun had noticed that someone from the other world had been in the palace. But his mother had soothed him with her soft words, assuring him that this was not so. So the princess took heart when she saw how kindly she was treated, and asked, "But how in the world is it possible for the sun to be angry? He is so beautiful and so good to mortals."
"This is how it happens," replied the sun's mother. "In the morning, when he stands at the gates of paradise, he is happy, and smiles on the whole world. But during the day he gets cross, because he sees all the evil deeds of men, and this is why his heat becomes so scorching. But in the evening he is both sad and angry, for as he stands at the gates of death, that is his usual course, from there he comes back here."
Then she told the princess that she had asked about her husband, but that her son had replied that he knew nothing about him, and that her only hope was to go and inquire of the wind. Before the princess left, the mother gave her a roast chicken to eat, and advised her to take great care of the bones, which she did, wrapping them up in her bundle. Then she threw away her second pair of shoes, which were quite worn out, and with her child on her arm and her staff in her hand, she set forth on her way to the wind. In these wanderings she met with even greater difficulty than before, for she came upon one mountain of flints after another, out of which tongues of fire would flame up. She passed through woods which had never been trodden by human foot, and had to cross fields of ice and avalanches of snow. The poor woman nearly died from these hardships, but she kept a brave heart, and at length she reached the enormous cave in the side of a mountain. This was where the wind lived. There was a little door in the railing in front of the cave, and here the princess knocked and begged for admission. The mother of the wind took pity on her and took her in, that she might rest a little. Here, too, she was hidden away, so that the wind might not notice her. The next morning, the mother of the wind told her that her husband was living in a thick wood, so thick that no axe had been able to cut a way through it. Here he had built himself a sort of house by placing trunks of trees together, and fastening them with withes and here he lived alone, shunning humankind. After the Mother of the Wind had given the princess a chicken to eat, and had warned her to take care of the bones, she advised her to go by the Milky Way, which at night lies across the sky, to wander on until she reached her goal. Having thanked the old woman with tears in her eyes for her hospitality, and for the good news that she had given her, the princess set out on her journey, and rested neither day nor night, so great was her longing to see her husband again. On and on she walked, until her last pair of shoes fell into pieces. So she threw them away, and went on with bare feet, not heeding the bogs, nor the thorns that wounded her, nor the stones that bruised her. At last she reached a beautiful green meadow on the edge of a wood. Her heart was cheered by the sight of the flowers and the soft, cool grass, and she sat down and rested for a little. But hearing the birds chirping to their mates among the trees made her think of longing for her husband, and she wept bitterly, and taking her child into her arms and her bundle of chicken bones on her shoulder, she entered the woods. For 3 days and 3 nights she struggled through, but could find nothing. She was quite worn out with weariness and hunger, and even her staff was no further help to her, for in her many wanderings it had become quite blunted. She almost gave up in despair, but made one last great effort, and suddenly in a thicket she came upon a sort of house that the Mother of the Wind had described. It had no windows, and the door was up in the roof. Round the house she went in search of steps, but could find none. What was she to do? How was she to get in? She thought, and tried in vain to climb up to the door. And finally she remembered of the chicken bones that she had dragged all the weary way, and said to herself, "They would not have told me to take such good care of these bones, if they had not been for some good reason of doing so. Perhaps now, in my hour of need, they may be of some use to me." So she took the bones out of her bundle, and having thought a moment, she placed 2 ends together. To her surprise, they stuck tight. Then she added the other bones, till she had 2 long poles the height of the house. Then she placed these against the wall, at a distance of a yard from one another. Across them she placed the other bones, piece by piece, like the steps of a ladder. As soon as one step was finished, she stood on it, and made the next one, and then the next one, and then the next, until she was so close to the door. But when she had got near the top, she noticed that there were no more bones left for the last rung of the ladder. What was she to do? Without that last step, the whole ladder was useless. She must have lost one of the bones. Then suddenly an idea came to her. Taking a knife, she chopped off her little finger and placed it on the last step. It stuck, as the other bones had done. The ladder was complete, and with her child on her arm, she entered the door to the house. Here she found everything in perfect order. Having taken some food, she laid the child down to sleep in a trough that was on the floor, and sat down herself to rest. When her husband, the pig, came back to his house, he was startled by what he saw. At first he could not believe his eyes, and stared at the ladder of bones, and at the little finger on top of it. He felt that some fresh magic must be at work, and in his terror he almost turned away from the house. But then a better idea came to him, and he changed himself into a dove, so that no witchcraft could ever have power over him, and flew down into the room without touching the ladder. Here he found a woman rocking a child. At the sight of her, looking
So changed by all that she had suffered for his sake, his heart was moved by such love and longing, and by such great a pity, that he suddenly became a man. The princess stood up when she saw him, and her heart beat with fear, for she did not know him. But when he had told her who he was, in her great joy she forgot all of her sufferings, and they seemed as nothing to her. He was a very handsome man, as straight as a fir tree. They sat down together, and she told him all of her adventures, and he wept with pity at the tale. And then he told her his own history. I am a king's son. Once my father was fighting against some dragons who were the scourges of the country. I slew the youngest dragon. His mother, who was a witch, cast a spell over me and changed me into a pig. It was she, in the disguise of the old woman, who gave you the thread to bind around my foot, so that instead of 3 days that had run before the spell was broken, I was forced to remain a pig for 3 more years. Now that we have suffered for each other, and have found each other again, let us forget the past. And in their joy they kissed one another. The next morning they set out early to return to his father's kingdom. Great was the rejoicing of all the people when they saw him and his wife. His father and his mother embraced them both, and there was feasting in the palace for 3 days and 3 nights. And then they set out to see her father. The old king nearly went out of his mind with joy at beholding his daughter again. When she had told him all of her adventures, he said to her, "Did I not tell you that I was quite sure that the creature who wooed and had won you for his wife had not been born a pig? You see, my child, how wise you are in doing what I told you to." And as the king was old and had no heirs, he put them on the throne in his place. And they ruled as only kings rule who have suffered many things. And if they are not dead, they are still living and ruling happily. I think that is one that I just read a couple of weeks ago when I was doing a previous book. I know the next one is the Orca. But of course all these stories are in my previous streams, and if you look at the Old Wolf Storyteller, they will probably be listed under that in my videos on here. It's 10:40. Do I want to try to get a third story in? Let's see. What is the next story? The Norca. It's only 7 pages. Yeah, I'll do it. Why not? I don't know what an orca looks like. I'll have a description of an orca in here. So, anyway. I got a rock? What? Got a lady in with a stone. Yeah, let's see what that is. It doesn't say anything particular with it.
game does not show me what it is. Oh well. Let's go ahead and do the last story while I'm thinking. And awake. Okay, so our last tale for this wonderful Friday night of fairy tales is the Norca. So, the Norca. Once upon a time there lived a king and queen. They had 3 sons, 2 of them with their wits about them, and the third was a bit of a simpleton. Now the king had a deer park in which there were quantities of wild animals of different kinds, and to that park there used to come a huge beast. Norca was its name, and do fearful mischief, devouring some of the animals every night. The king did all he could, but he was unable to destroy it. So he at last called his sons together and said, "Whoever will destroy the Norca, to him I will give half my kingdom." The eldest son undertook the task. As soon as it was night, he took his weapons and set out. But before he reached the park, he went into a traktor, or a tavern, and there he spent the whole night in revelry. When he came to his senses, it was too late, and the dawn had already broken. He felt himself a disgrace in the eyes of his father, and there was no help for it. The next day the second son went, and did just the same. Their father scolded them both soundly, and there was an end of it. Well, almost. On the third day the youngest son undertook the task. They all laughed at him to scorn, because he was, well, stupid, and feeling sure he wouldn't do anything. But he took his arms and went straight into the park, and sat down on the grass in such a position that the moment he went to sleep his weapons would prick him and keep him awake. Presently the midnight hour sounded. The earth began to shake, and the Norca came rushing up, and burst right through the fence into the park, so huge it was. The prince pulled himself together, leapt to his feet, and crossed himself, then went straight at the beast. It fled back, and the prince ran after it, but soon he saw that he couldn't catch it on foot, so he hastened to the stable, laid his hands on the best horse there, and went off in pursuit. Presently he came up with the beast, and they began to fight. They fought and fought, and the prince gave the beast 3 great wounds. At last they were both utterly exhausted, so they both lay down to take a short rest. But the moment the prince closed his eyes, up jumped the beast and took to flight. The prince's horse woke him up, and he jumped up in a moment and set off in pursuit, caught up to the beast again, and they began fighting. Again the prince gave the beast 3 wounds, but then he and the beast lay down to rest. Thereupon away fled the beast as before. The prince caught up, and again gave it 3 wounds, but all of a sudden, just as the prince began chasing it for the 4th time, the beast fled into a great white stone, tilted it up, and escaped into the other world, crying out to the prince, "Then only will you overcome me when you enter here." The prince went home, and told his father all that had happened, and asked him for a leather rope plaited, long enough to reach the other world. The father ordered this to be done, and when the rope was made, the prince called to his brothers, and he and they, having taken servants with him, and everything that was needed for a whole year, set out for the place where the beast had disappeared under the stone. When they got there, they built a palace on the spot, and lived in it for some time. But when everything was ready, the youngest brother said to the others, "Now, brothers, who is going to lift the stone?" Neither of them could so much as stir it, but as soon as he touched it, away it flew in the distance, though it was ever so big as a hill. And when he had flung the stone aside, he spoke a second time to his brothers. "Who is going into the other world to overcome the Norca?"
neither of them offered to do so. Then he laughed at them for being such cowards. "Well, brothers, farewell. Lower me into the other world, and don't go away from here, but as soon as the cord is jerked, pull it up." His brothers lowered him accordingly, but when he had reached the other world beneath the earth, he went on his way. He walked and walked. Presently he espied a horse with rich trappings, and said to him, "Hail, Prince Ivan! Long have I waited for thee." He mounted the horse and rode on, and rode, until he saw standing before him a palace made of copper. He entered the courtyard, tied up his horse, and went indoors. In one of the rooms the dinner was laid out. He sat down and dined, and then he went to a bedroom. There he found a bed, on which he lay down to rest. Presently there came in a lady, more beautiful than can be imagined anywhere but in a fairy tale, who said,
"Thou art in my house, name thyself. If thou art an old man, thou shalt be my father. If a middle-aged man, my brother. But if a young man, thou shalt be my husband dear. If thou art a woman, and an old one, thou shalt be my grandmother. If middle-aged, my mother. If a girl, thou shalt be my own sister."
Thereupon he came forth, and when she saw him, she was delighted with him, and said,
"Wherefore, Prince Ivan, my dear husband thou shalt be. Where hast thou come hither?"
Then he told her all that had happened, and said, "The beast which thou
"Wishest to overcome is my brother. He is staying just now with my second sister, who lives not far from here in another palace. I bound up the wounds that you did give him."
Well, after this they drank and enjoyed themselves, and held sweet converse together. And then the prince took leave of her, and on to the second sister, the one who lived in a silver palace, and with her also he stayed a while. She told him that her brother Norka was then at the youngest sister's. So he went on to the youngest sister, who lived in a golden palace. She told him that her brother was at this time asleep on the blue sea, and she gave him a sword of steel and a draught of water of strength, and told him to cut off her brother's head with a single stroke. And when he had heard these things, he went on his way. And when the prince came to the blue sea, he looked. There slept the Norka on a stone in the middle of the sea, and when it snored, the water was agitated for 7 miles around. The prince crossed himself and went up to it, and smote it on the head with a sword. The head jumped off, saying a while, "Well, I'm done for now," and it rolled away into the sea. After killing the beast, the prince went back again, picking up all the 3 sisters along the way, with the intention of taking them up into the outer world. For they loved him and would not be separated from him. Each of them turned her palace into an egg, for they were enchantresses. And they taught him how to turn the eggs into palaces and back again, and they handed over the eggs to him. And then they all went to the place from which they dwelt and had been hoisted up to the upper world. And when they came to where the rope was, the prince took a hold of it and made the hastens fast to it. And then he jerked away at the rope, and his brothers began to haul it up. And when they hauled it up and had set eyes on the wondrous maidens, they went aside and said, "Let's lower the rope and pull our brother up part of the way, and then cut the rope. Perhaps he'll be killed, and then, if he isn't, he'll never give up these beauties." So when they had agreed to this, they lowered the rope, but their brother was no fool.
He guessed what they were at, and so he fastened the rope to a stone, and then gave it a pull. His brothers hoisted the stone to a great height, and then cut the rope. Down fell the stone and broke into pieces. The prince poured forth tears and went away, while he walked and walked. Presently a storm rose, and lightning flashed, and thunder roared, and rain fell in torrents. He went up to a tree in order to make shelter under it, and on that tree he saw some young birds, which were being thoroughly drenched. So he took off his coat and covered them with it, and he himself sat down under the tree. Presently there came flying a bird, such a big one that the light was blotted out of the sky. It had been dark before, but now it became darker still. Now this was the mother of those small birds which the prince had covered up. And when the bird had come flying up and perceived that her little ones were covered over, she said,
"I was wrapped by his nestlings."
And presently, seeing the prince, she added,
"Didst thou do that? Thanks! In return, ask me for anything thou desire. I will do anything for thee."
"Then carry me to the other world?" he asked.
"Make me a large vessel with a partition in the middle," said she. "Catch all sorts of game and put them into one half of it, and into the other pour half the water, so that there may be meat and drink for me."
And the prince did this. Then the bird, having taken the vessel on her back, with the prince sitting in the middle of it, began to fly off. After flying some distance, she brought him to his journey's end, and took leave of him, and flew away back. But when he went to the house of a certain tailor, and he engaged himself as his servant. So much the worse for wear he was, so thoroughly had he altered in appearance, that nobody would have suspected him of being a prince. Having entered to the service of his master, the prince began to ask what was going on in the country, and his master replied, "Our two princes, for the third one has disappeared, have brought away brides from the other world, and want to marry them, but those brides refuse. For they insist on having their wedding clothes made from their first, exactly like those they had in the other world, and without measuring them. The king has called all the workmen together, but none of them will undertake to do it." The prince, having heard all this, said, "Go to the king, master, and tell him that you will provide everything that's in your line." "However, I cannot undertake clothes of that sort. I work for quite common folk," said his master. "Go along, master. I will answer for everything," said the prince. So the tailor went, and the king was delighted that at least one good, hard-working man had been found, and gave him as much money as he ever wanted. When his tailor had settled everything, he went home, and the prince said to him, "Now then, pray to God and lie down to sleep. Tomorrow all will be ready." And the tailor followed his lad's advice and went to bed. Midnight sounded. The prince arose and went out to the city into the fields. He took out of his pocket the eggs the maidens had given him, and, as they had taught him, he turned them into 3 palaces. Into each of these he entered, and took the maidens' robes, and went out again, and turned the palaces back into eggs, and he went home. And when he got there, he hung up the robes on the wall, and then lay down to sleep. Early in the morning his master awoke, and behold, there hung such robes as he had never seen before, all shining with gold and silver and precious stones. He was delighted, and he seized them and carried them off to the king. When the princesses saw that the clothes were those which had been theirs in the other world, they guessed that Prince Ivan was in this world. So they exchanged glances with each other, and held their peace.
And the master, handing over the clothes, went home, but he no longer found his dear journeyman there. For the prince had gone to a shoemaker's, and him too he sent to work for the king. And in the same way he went round all the other artificers, and they all proffered him thanks, in so much as he had helped enrich them. By the time the princely workmen had gone around to all the artificers, the princesses had received what they had asked for. All their clothes were just like what they had in the other world. They wept bitterly because the prince had not come, and it was impossible for them to hold out any longer. It was necessary that they should be married. But when they were ready for the wedding, the youngest bride said to the king,
"Allow me, my father, to go and give alms to the beggars."
He gave her leave, and she went and began bestowing alms upon them, and examining them closely. And when she had come to one of them, and was going to give him some money, she caught sight of the ring which she had given the prince in the other world, and her sister's rings too, for it really was he. So she seized him by the hand and brought him into the hall, and said to the king,
"Here is he who brought us out from the other world. His brothers forbade us to say that he was alive, threatening to slay us if we did."
Then the king was wroth with those sons, and punished them as he thought best. And afterwards 3 weddings were celebrated. However, it didn't say if the one son got to marry all 3, or if he was nice enough to let his brothers marry the other 2. Thank you for the hydrate, because I am needing it. Oh. So much fun doing all the voices. It really is. Let's see. Oh, no. Looks like Waste is already over for the night, so I can't read him. Does anyone have any rating suggestions? Yeah, I'm probably going to go make some tea after this anyway. As difficult as some of the princess voices happen to be, the old crone ones are much harder on my voice. The old crone ones are harder on my voice. Snooze these last ads. But let's see. Looks like we've got a oh, voices are just fun to do. Though there's been a few of the fairy tales I've read that have songs. Singing in the voices is hard. I regret trying to do The Little Mermaid once. And it didn't even have that much songs. There was one that... Well, I did one earlier that the peacocks were supposed to be singing, and that was just horrible. If you missed the first story, they were talking about how a peacock sounded, so I imitated one, and I really wish I hadn't. Because peacocks have a very particular sound. Thank you. But it's like, I'm going to move away from the microphone because my peacock is really loud.
Because peacocks are roughly... Ugh. I've worked with animals. Oh. But like it was Princess Rosette that she would marry no one but the king of peacocks. There's a exotic ranch maybe 20 miles from here that my sister helped take care of animals, and there's a animal rehab here in town that I've worked at a couple of times. So I've got to work with a lot of interesting animals, both foreign and domestic. The coyotes have been fun to play with. I missed my bobcat, though. She was cool. I think the wildlife rehab, it's the place where my donation thing goes to, the Wild West Wildlife. But I've worked with him, well, I've worked with him unofficially, but my sister's worked with him officially for a couple years. In fact, one of the pilquins that I use is actually from one of the ravens that lived there. I actually made a pilquin from a raven quill. From a bird that I actually knew. They won't let me bring home any of the hawk feathers, because they feed hawks and everything else. It just needs rehab, so... Yeah, that's the Wild West Wildlife Animal Rehab. But it's a cool place to work, and they do a lot of animal rescues, and wolves, ravens, because they're fun to talk to. A couple owls are always nice. Had a couple of badgers there that were fun. I personally live with 3 cats, so... And I feed ferals, so I take care of as many animals as I can. Not very many in my area. Because High Plains doesn't really take care of many crocs and alligators. I haven't minded the few that I've played with, but, yeah. Yeah, there's snakes around here. Mostly bull snakes, rattlesnakes. Down one of the camps I used to go to, they had a lot of water moccasins, but... Yeah, there's definitely snakes. Wolf snakes are cute. Little snub nose. And they do have snake rehabbing at Wild West as well. So I don't know if they purposefully take care of rattlesnakes, but they will take care of other snakes. But they've had some rattlesnakes living around them, and they have left food out for them before. So rattlesnakes, not the best pets. But that's the place I'm trying to do the charity for, but I haven't gotten many donations on that either. Let's see. It's after 11. I gotta find somewhere to raid out to. And make some tea. I definitely feel like I need some tea now. Ad break. No. Okay. Let's see. Who's gonna raid? Okay. Welcome back. But Altered Entertainment is another one that I ran across, so is another author who also streams, so let's go ahead and read them. So let us go check up on him, and hopefully I will see you next time. I don't have anything else scheduled until next week, so yeah, have a good evening, afternoon, whichever it may be. Yeah, thank you for coming by. Why does it only say 1? Oh well. Have a good evening. I'm gonna go make some tea. Computer.
Okay. Demon is fine. Demon Kai. Got it. Thank you. I appreciate that. Working through the Red Fairy book. I know I saw you. That's what you've been reading for a while now. How are you enjoying it? 14 experience. How long until I can level up? He doesn't really kind of tell me. Let's check the building plan to find out where this place, if there is a place where all the vents connect. Okay, how do I find the building plan though? Like, do I talk to the neighbor? I should have been checking with him every day. Okay, you knock on the door of your friend's door and wait. Huh? Kana's not home. You should check back later. Okay, let's investigate. We don't have, so